Hello, students. All right, we continue today with the birth process, part of 11.4. So, the essential understanding is that the birth is mediated by positive feedback involving estrogen and oxytocin. So, these are two hormones that are found in the mother's body. So, here we see that the process of childbirth or parturition occurs via positive feedback. So we're going to look at the role of positive feedback first before we look at the hormonal role. So here you see a fetus that, let's say, has reached 40 weeks, or we see the fetus at the 9-month end of the pregnancy. So the fetus, if it's in the right position and not in the breech position, which is feet pointing down, the fetus is putting pressure on the mother's cervix right here. So the fetus is pushing. The fetus has a certain weight, somewhere around 7 pounds. It could be a 10-pound baby. But the fetus here is pushing on the cervix. So as the baby pushes on the cervix, it causes the cervix to stretch. And then the stretching of the cervix causes nerve impulses to be sent to the brain. So then the brain is going to stimulate the posterior pituitary, which is it's the other side of the pituitary gland, which we haven't really looked at. And that part of the pituitary gland releases oxytocin. Oxytocin is a hormone that causes the uterus to contract. Okay, so if a female is taken to the hospital, perhaps because it's after the 40 weeks and a doctor needs to induce the birthing process, the doctor is going to inject intravenously these hormones, estrogen and oxytocin, to induce the birth process. So as far as the hormonal control, there are important 4 hormones that are involved in the birth process. So we have oxytocin, estrogen, and progesterone. And notice how estrogen can also be called estriol, which is the same thing as estrogen. And these 3 hormones here are produced by the mother, and then prostaglandin, which is produced by the fetus. So after 9 months, we said that the baby is fully grown. The baby is applying pressure to the cervix of the mother, and this stress is going to cause the muscles here to send nerve signals to the brain, and the the posterior pituitary is going to release oxytocin. Now, oxytocin is going to promote uterine contractions. So as the uterus contracts, I guess we need to go back here and see. So as the uterus contracts, right, so all of this surrounding part is the uterus. So as the uterus contracts and the baby pushes down, what happens here is that the cervix dilates. And that means that the cervix here starts to open. And it's going to dilate about 10 centimeters. And that might not seem like a very lengthy opening for that fetus to come out, right? But indeed, that's all it is, right? So a fully dilated woman is 10 centimeters. So as the uterine contracts, what happens after with the other hormones? So we see here that the placenta is releasing estrogen, and the placenta is releasing progesterone. And remember that progesterone has maintained the endometrium, right? We want those high levels of progesterone to maintain that endometrium. But notice that as the levels of estrogen here go up, the levels of estrogen promote oxytocin production. So at the birthing process, the levels of estrogen shoot up higher than the levels of progesterone. Now, the higher the levels of estrogen are, that is going to inhibit the levels of progesterone. So remember that the progesterone has been keeping the endometrium. So as the levels of progesterone drop, right, then that means that the fetus can be expelled as well. Okay. Also, the progesterone inhibits uterine contraction, so this is kind of counterproductive to what's happening at the moment, right? During the birthing process, you want to promote uterine contraction. So then that means that you want to lower the amount of progesterone, and you do so by increasing the amount of estrogen. Also, oxytocin that is being released by the posterior pituitary, that also inhibits the amount of progesterone. So again, progesterone needs to be inhibited during the birthing process. Okay? Now, the fetus is also releasing a hormone of its own. It's releasing prostaglandins, and prostaglandins promote uterine contraction. So this is what we want during the birthing process, right? We want the uterus to contract. We want the cervix to stretch. We want dilation of about 10 centimeters so that the mother can push the baby out through the vagina canal, and also the placenta needs to be expelled. So this is what we call the afterbirth. The placenta gets expelled. Now, as soon as the baby comes out, remember that the baby is still attached to the umbilical cord. So that umbilical cord needs to be cut, and the umbilical cord needs to be clipped, and because otherwise the baby might bleed out. Once the umbilical cord is cut and clipped, it's probably going to dry out and fall out within a month's time, and that's where your belly button now is. Okay, so baby comes out, placenta comes out, and that's it. That's what happens during the birthing process. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. We only have one more section to go, which is the gestation periods in different mammals.